Things began to change with John's diagnosis of dementia.
I actually knew that there was something wrong before he was diagnosed by the neurology team at UCSF. We were on vacation in Vienna, and John was trying to read the map to get us back to our hotel, and he couldn't figure out the map. And I thought, God, that's really weird. And then I realized he didn't remember what we had done the day before.
Hello, I'm Deepika Sandhu, the CEO of Soul Sparks Press, and I am so excited to be in conversation today with the latest best-selling, award-winning author from Soul Sparks Press, Erica Baccus. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. How are you?
Your book, A Promise Kept, has swept into the world, taken everything by storm. The reception has been phenomenal. How does that feel for you?
Rewarding and fulfilling and great, thank you.
I think it's been a lot more than all of those things, because one of the really interesting things about your journey with this book is how much of your life has sort of become this book. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This book is my life, and one of the things that has become so apparent to me is that the story is about how my husband died, and I have been writing to keep him next to me. And I have found that I didn't want to stop writing because that would mean letting go, and I don't want to leave. I don't want to let him go. So by writing, I keep him with me, and I think about him, and I get to enjoy the memories, and I still feel very, very close to him through the writing. And I've continued writing. I'm writing about other things beyond the book that includes my husband. So I think he and I are going to be a pair for eternity here.
I'm sure he would love to hear that. A Promise Kept has won Los Angeles Tribune critically acclaimed bestseller. You are an Amazon bestseller. The book has been so beautifully received, and like you said, it was a way for you to keep your husband John alive, to write with him. You guys had a love story for the ages, starting as an office romance all the way through to his last breath. Tell us about this love that you two enjoyed.
It was love at first sight for me, and I think it took him a little bit longer. And the first chapter in the book is called Trust Your Lust. So it was definitely lust for me before it was love. And we became just really great friends in the very beginning of our relationship. We met at work, and he was married at the time, and I was living with another man. And so we just had this natural friendship that grew in the office space. And as time passed, years passed, where I heard that he had become separated from his wife, and my relationship was ending at the same time. And that friendship turned into something else. And the longer we were married, the more in love we were. People used to comment to me all the time about he and I were always holding hands, and that you could tell that we were in love, even after we'd been married 20 years, 30 years. And it was just one of those things where we were the right people for each other.
30-year love story full of adventure, full of magic, full of family, full of fun. And then things began to change with John's diagnosis of dementia. Tell us about that day that you find out he has dementia.
I actually knew that there was something wrong before he was diagnosed by the neurology team at UCSF. We were on vacation in 2017, and we were in Vienna, and John was trying to read the map to get us back to our hotel, and he kept turning the map 90 degrees at a time. And John was an excellent map reader, and he didn't like to use technology. He wanted to use a paper map. And he couldn't figure out the map, and he couldn't figure out the way back to the hotel. And I thought, God, that's really weird. And then I realized he didn't remember what we had done the day before. And when I told him where we were going to go the next day, he didn't quite remember what our plans were. And I just said to myself, well, we're on vacation. I don't want to worry about it now. And we got home, and he went back to normal. So I quit thinking about it. Until late in 2019, John said to me, there's something wrong with my memory. And I said, oh, John, all of us at our age are starting to have memory problems. And he said, no, this is different. And he and I went to a primary care appointment, and he expressed his concern to the doctor. The doctor put him through one of those typical memory tests. He did better on it than I was doing in my own head. If you can get a grade on it, he would have aced it. And the doctor said, if you're still concerned about it, I'm going to put a recommendation for you at UCSF Memory Care Unit. And that was 2019. Finally, in early 2020, I made an appointment with UCSF and we went there. And it's described in the book. It was an 8-hour day of talking to a team of doctors, both he and I, separately and together. And it was extraordinary, in-depth, stressful day that you spend wondering what's going to happen at the end of this. And at the very end, we were in this big conference room with big tables sitting around, and there were 5 doctors in there. And the main neurologist was sitting here, I was sitting here, and John was sitting on the other side of her, and then the other doctors down this way. And on the screen was John's brain, an image of John's brain. And the first thing they say is, if you look at the screen, do you see these gray areas? That's your hippocampus, and that's plaque on your hippocampus. And they said at that point in time, you have early cognitive impairment consistent with the beginning of Alzheimer's. And that's the way they say it. And how did I hear it? I was sort of like numb. It wasn't a surprise, but it was still shocking. And John sat there and he said, I have 2 questions. One, can I still drink alcohol? That's my dear sweet husband. And 2, how long before I'm a vegetable?
And that was so clear for John that he didn't want to get to a state where he didn't remember and understand the life that he was in. He was clear about that with you.
If I don't have a brain, I'm not a person. That's what he thought. And he said it over and over again to me. And part of it was that he and I had talked about it for years during the 40 years that we were married. If we were to ever get into this situation, what would we want to do? And we both had voiced the opinion that we didn't want to live in a vegetative state. And that was important to both of us.
And you guys were really particular about having those conversations that most people want to avoid. They never want to talk with their aging parent about the end of their life. They don't want to talk to their spouse or their siblings about this, but you guys were having those conversations.
John and I talked about everything. And my mother had early onset Alzheimer's. So I was familiar with what it looked like. And I thought perhaps I had the gene for it. I don't know. I did not expect John to be hit by Alzheimer's. I thought if anyone was going to be affected by it, it would be me. John was an extremely smart man. He did not have it in his family, so it came as bad luck.
But it's one thing that you encourage other people to have these conversations with their loved ones because so many people just avoid it.
I hope that's one of the messages that comes through in the book, is that when you're young enough in a relationship, that you discuss what your wishes are for your end of life. Because if you have to start talking about it when you're in the middle of a trauma, that's too late. It's too difficult, and you need to make plans and you need to figure it out. And there's so many decisions that have to be made. So fortunately for us, we had that first step taken care of. And so I hope that people understand that talking to your family, your extended family, your spouse, your partner, early on in your 50s, when you still think you're immortal, that's when you should start talking about it.
Even if you talk about it, it's very hard to implement the wishes of the other person. And in your case, John's wish was to die with dignity, to have an assisted suicide so that he could truly go out on his own terms and not get to the advanced stages of dementia. And that proved to be a huge challenge and one that you very dutifully executed for him all the way down to his very last day of life.
Well, in actuality, John didn't know about assisted suicide. He was thinking about suicide, and he tried figuring out how he could do it, and it's not that easy. And it took me 2 years to find the option. I learned about it through Amy Bloom's book, In Love. And when I learned about it, that there was this option in Switzerland where you could go and participate in assisted suicide, it took me 3 weeks to tell him about it. One is I didn't want to face it. And 2 is I thought if I tell him on a good day, I'm going to ruin his good day. And if I tell him when he's having a bad day, he won't be able to process the information. So it took me 3 weeks before I finally sat down with him and said, honey, I have to tell you something. And once I told him, that was it.
He knew that's immediately the option he wanted to do.
Come on, let's go.
And that began this process of you quite literally planning and executing your husband's very last day of life. I mean, just thinking about it in those planning period, which was a couple of months, right?
7 months it took me to orchestrate his death.
And now knowing it through the planning process and then actually having it happen that day, how were you experiencing it? Not just as the person trying to get it done for him, but as the wife really living through the exit of your husband from this world.
I really learned to compartmentalize while I was going through the process. John would ask me all the time, is this okay with you? And I knew that if I said no, he wouldn't do it. And I couldn't live with that. So what I had always said to him was, this is your life, John. You get to choose what you want to do with your life. And that was my stock answer. And that was part of our marriage too, that John got to be John and Erica got to be Erica. And we supported each other in our independence and our individuality. And this was John's choice. I thought that I was doing okay, but after it was over, I was traumatized. And I went through a very, very difficult time. I became irrational. I decided that I had murdered my husband. And it took some therapy, and it took my reading my journals where I had actual comments from him in my journals where he was asking me to help him die. I thought, oh, maybe I didn't push him into it. Oh, it says right here on this page, shoot me now, Erica, shoot me. So I got some relief. I got grounded in reality by rereading my journals. And then I started to write. And when I started to write, it just all came pouring out. And I sincerely did not want to quit writing. I got to the end of the story. There was nowhere else to go. So there's an end to the book. But the writing kept me grounded. It kept me close to John. And it helped me make sense of what happened. Because going through it, I was just doing step 1, step 2, step 3. For example, Dignitas, the name of the organization where John died, added a new requirement while I was going through the process with John, which was he needed to have dental records. And I had sent in all the documents that I thought I needed, and they emailed me back and said, we need to have his dental records. It's a new requirement that the police want to have. And I had to go to our dentist, who'd been our dentist for 25, 30 years, and I had to ask for John's dental records. And I thought, how am I going to do that? How do you sit there and say to this man who I've known for so many years that I want his dental records? Because I knew that once I said that, he would know there was a problem. And there is a chapter in the story in the book about the dentist. And it was one of the hardest things I had to do.
Well, your bravery in bringing this story out is so incredible. The book is so well written, and this is why it's already been recognized by the Los Angeles Tribune as a critically acclaimed bestseller. It's why people are reading it. It's why people are just being mesmerized by it. And I know now you want to be that advocate for people that are going through this process for themselves or experiencing these kinds of situations for themselves. How important is that for you now?
It's very important because I had an experience just the other day where a friend of mine has a friend who is in the beginning of Alzheimer's, and she started asking me all these questions. And I thought, don't you already know this? Haven't I already told you this? And she was listening to me and asking me more and more. And I thought she was so grateful to me when I was through explaining so many of the things that she needed to consider just as a friend. And I thought, this book can be really helpful. And that makes me feel like there is some reason for why I did what I did and some afterlife of the tragedy, and I call it a tragedy, that happened to us.
Well, you also are having an afterlife as a writer. And I always say writing is so healing. And you writing your story, I think, gave you so much perspective and healing and ability, like you said, to keep John alive. But you also birthed a whole new version of yourself, and you haven't stopped writing. You're writing the next thing that you want to publish too. Tell us about this writing journey of yours.
It's so interesting to me because there was one day after John died, I was talking to my son with whom I'm very close. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen to me, but something is happening. I can feel it. There's something inside me that's happening. And I never knew I could write. And it just has opened up a whole new side of me. I'm a little bit of a photographer.
No, you're a really good photographer. I've seen your stuff.
So there is that creative side there. And now this writing sort of goes hand in hand with the photography in a way. It's another way of looking at the world. And it's another way to see a different perspective of life. And it puts me into a closer space with myself and my relationships in the world. And now I've learned you just don't write a sentence. You look at every word that you put down and what does it mean and what am you communicating. And I get such a joy out of writing a good sentence.
There you go. Don't you read differently now too?
Oh gosh, yes. But I read to see how people write. For example, I just finished this book called Love Africa. It's a memoir about this New York Times journalist who lived in East Africa, where I have been, and I love Africa. And I noticed how he is so descriptive. I could read it with that understanding of what he was trying to do as he wrote. So there's sort of like, there's me looking down at the writing and me absorbing the writing.
That's beautiful. Well, Erica, I appreciate so much your story being part of our Soul Sparks Press family. You have brought out just an exquisite piece of work that I think is truly soul sparking. It's going to change perspectives, change minds. I always say it's a too hanky tearjerker because it truly is a love story for the ages, and what you went through and experienced moving John towards his last day of life is just beautiful to read, beautiful to witness. So thank you so much for bringing your story to life with Soul Sparks Press.
Well, thank you for helping me bring it to life.
And if you are ready to bring your story to life with Soul Sparks Press, just know you have a home right here.